Hello guys, welcome to the Al-Rasta channel to discuss and explain the exciting storyline of your favorite series, SwallowedStar episode 190. In the previous episode, we saw King Yachen choose to sacrifice his own life, blowing himself up in the sacrificial tower to give his younger sister and Luofeng a chance to escape. However, in the end, they ended up temporarily cooperating with the enemy when Elder Chuchi-Ka of the Yanji race appeared and revealed that the treasure Luofeng was carrying was fake. Next, Elder Chuchi-Ka took Luofeng and the others to the room where the real treasure was kept. In reality, Elder Chuchi-Ka deliberately led Luofeng and the others into a trap he had prepared. So, what happened next? Okay, without further ado, let's get into the story. After Elder Chuchi-Ka locked the second treasure room, the warriors inside realized they were trapped by him. The strongest among them, King Kangjin, was pressing forward, stabbing Yanji's race body on the wall with a spear charged with lightning power. Secretly, Chuchi-Ka communicated with Lord Pu-ai outside the room to immediately go to the real treasure room. Well, it turned out that this room was not the only place that stored the sacrificial tower's treasures. Even though he knew that Chuchi-Ka was in a bad situation, Lord Pu-ai chose to go to another treasure room. As he hurried away, he could only hope that Elder Chuchi-Ka would get out safely. When faced with a crisis, Chuchi-Ka recalled the past, when the four supreme races invaded his home just to obtain Yanji's inheritance. It was a tragedy that claimed many lives. Meanwhile, the Yanji race was completely unable to resist. Even Martha, the lover of Elder Chuchi-Ka, also perished in the incident. Therefore, to seek revenge, Chuchi-Ka now chooses to blow himself up, eliminating the enemies within the room. Meanwhile, Lord Pu-ai paused when he realized that Elder Chuchi-Ka intended to sacrifice himself. Even though he was about to die, Elder Chuchi-Ka felt no regret. He would die peacefully. In addition to making a sacrifice for the revival of his race, Chuchi-Ka had actually wanted to follow his lover Martha for a very long time. Previously, he couldn't do it because there was still a new generation that he had to guide. But now he could die peacefully and follow his lover. Sleeping forever in the sacrificial tower, Chuchi-Ka finally died with a smile on his face. On the other hand, when the effects of Chuchi-Ka's explosive peak were released, the warriors trapped inside the room quickly set up defensive stances and equipment to protect themselves from the terrifying explosion. Luofeng and Star Fantasy took cover behind the Beast God armament shield, while King Jin set up a lightning barrier, and Purple Clock entered a purple prism called the Ancient Purple Bell. Meanwhile, Lord Pu-ai, who had resumed his journey, heard the sacrificial tower. AI system deliver the final message left by Elder Chuchi-Ka before his death. The message would only be played once Chuchi-Ka had truly passed away. The message contained an apology to Pu-ai, because in reality, for billions of years, Chuchi-Ka had only survived on faith. He had faith that if his race could regain its inheritance, they would rise again. But now, that faith could be realized. That was why Chuchi-Ka hoped that Pu-ai could safely bring back Yanji's secret inheritance. The future of the Yanji race now lies entirely in Lord Pu-ai's hands. The death message made Pu-ai cry. But for the sake of his people's future, he continued his journey to the inheritance chamber in a different location. Moreover, he now had the token to open the chamber. After the explosion subsided, none of the warriors trapped in the room had died. Kangjin felt that Chuchi-Ka's struggle had been in vain. Kangjin did not know that his sacrifice was actually just a diversion. Purple Clock, who was beside him, did not expect that Chuchi-Ka was actually very good at pretending. Luofeng and Star Fantasy, who had survived, saw that Kangjin and Purple Clock were still standing in front of them, almost unharmed by the previous explosion. Meanwhile, Luofeng's side chose to monitor the situation first and not act recklessly while watching what the machine race would do to open the chain treasure chest in the room, and would only act according to the situation later. Since Chuchi-Ka was dead, Kangjin had no choice but to try to open the treasure chest by force. He surrounded the chest with lightning. The lightning formed a cage-like sphere that seemed as if it would open the chest immediately. However, in reality, the energy of the lightning cage was negated by the treasure chest. That made Kangjin even angrier. He used his immense strength, trying to force the chest open by hitting it with his spear, kicking it, and even trying to use his hands to pry it open. Because he used such terrifying force, Luofeng and the others had to put up a protective barrier so they wouldn't be affected by Kong Jin's rage. In the end, Kong Jin was still unable to open the chained chest. Purple Clock was annoyed with Kang Jin for opening the chest so brutally and not caring at all about the lives of the people there. Tong Jin, who was annoyed, moved back and immediately asked the three of them to try to open the chest themselves. Actually, Luofeng already had an idea of how to open the treasure chest. He could use Moshe's clone body to replicate the Yanji race's appearance, tricking the treasure chest's sensor system and allowing him to open it. But if the chest was opened in front of the enemy, then of course Luofeng would definitely not get a share. In fact, the enemy would immediately try to finish him off. As for Star Fantasy, in order to revive her brother, she needed a lot of money. That's why she had to get the treasure. But was that possible? Seeing the stronger enemies, Star Fantasy felt pessimistic about being able to get the treasure. From their expressions, Purple Clock was thinking of a way to open the chest, while Star Fantasy had already given up. As for Luofeng, he pretended to be thinking when he already knew how. After realizing that the three people there also had no way to open the treasure chest, Kang Jin then told the three of them to leave the room using teleportation through God Country transmission.
不就等于把宝藏让给你？
全国传送离开，那又如何？
Of course, the three of them didn't want to. Doing so would be tantamount to handing over their treasures to Kang Jin. Besides, if the three of them left together, using the God Country transmission teleportation device in that room, their coordinates would be exposed to Kang Jin. In the future, there was a possibility that Kang Jin would come and finish off the three of them using those coordinates. That's why Purple Clock thought that Kang Jin, who was the strongest, should leave first using his God Country transmission teleportation. The rest would leave after Kang Jin had gone. Luofeng and Star Fantasy agreed with Purple Clock's suggestion. However, Kang Jin, who suddenly unleashed his lightning power, considered the three of them very brave for defying his orders. While preparing to attack, Kang Jin said that even though he couldn't get the treasure there, at least he could get the wealth owned by Luofeng, Star Fantasy, and Purple Clock. That was much better than getting nothing. Well, next, Kang Jin would try to finish off the three of them. In the end, the battle was unavoidable. The three warriors worked together to defeat Kang Jin. Star Fantasy launched the first attack with a laser beam. It was a diversionary attack while Luofeng and Purple Clock attacked at close range. However, Kang Jin was able to break the combo, considering it was nothing more than children fighting. Launching a series of follow-up attacks, Luofeng and Star Fantasy once again engaged in close combat. All this was to give Purple Clock time to activate his restraining artifact, the Ancient Purple Bell. Right after Purple Clock trapped Kang Jin inside the bell, Luofeng immediately chained him with the Cloud Contact Vine. But that method could only restrain Kang Jin for a short while. Soon after, the restraints were destroyed. However, Star Fantasy had prepared another method. He unleashed the power of time reversal, rewinding time to a few seconds earlier when Kang Jin's body was still restrained. With Kang Jin restrained once more, Star Fantasy unleashed a pink scythe attack from a distance. Their strategy may have looked effective, but unfortunately the attack still couldn't defeat Kang Jin. Even the attack launched by the woman was easily caught with one hand by Kang Jin and destroyed. Launching a counterattack, Kang Jin then moved with lightning speed. With his spear, he struck Luofeng and Purple Clock alternately. When the attack was directed at Star Fantasy, the woman created a dimensional shield. Unfortunately, Kang Jin managed to plant his spear in Star Fantasy's stomach. Star Fantasy is now unable to fight. Her injuries are too severe. Luofeng then moves the woman's body into his world ring to prevent her divine body from being completely destroyed. The battle is not over yet. Purple Clock says that he had previously placed his hopes in the two humans who helped him, but now that is useless. From this point on, Purple Clock would act alone, no longer hesitating to reveal his final trump card. 3 unusual purple balls appeared along with the bodies of Kang Jin and Luofeng, entering the Demon Sound Fire God Bell artifact. Unlike the ancient purple bell, the aura of this demon sound fire god bell artifact was clearly more terrifying than before. It looked like a galaxy continuously rotating inside, as if carrying Luofeng through infinite time. Luofeng was sure that the treasure Purple Clock was using was a heavy treasure, or what could be called a treasure with power at the Universe Venerable level. Purple Clock laughed and said that 3 immortal warrior kings had died because of his demon sound fire god bell, and next it would be Kang Jin's turn. Kang Jin unleashed various attacks at the purple walls around him, but nothing happened. That was enough to prove how powerful the demon sound fire god bell artifact was. Purple Clock also whispered to Luofeng that he would accompany Kang Jin to his death inside, and that Purple Clock would take both of their treasures. To finish off his enemy, Purple Clock then took out an A812 type Fire God Origin Crystal, which was 3 times more powerful than the self-detonation of the Immortal King Warrior. And inside the Demon Sound Fire God Bell, which had limited space, the explosive power would be devastating, but its range would be small. Even Kang Jin wouldn't be able to survive. The treasure chest in that room would also become his, as would the treasures of Luofeng and Kang Jin, which would also be taken. From this point on, Purple Clock was overjoyed that the plan he had prepared had finally come to fruition. When the God Origin Crystal exploded, Luofeng survived using Shu's wings, while Kang Jin set up a lightning barrier, but his physical body was instantly destroyed. His body could indeed be revived, but after respawning, he was immediately hit by the explosion's effects again. Before he truly died, Kang Jin said goodbye to his disciples and his master. And in the end, rather than dying in vain, Kang Jin intended to take the Purple Clock with him by detonating himself. When the 2 explosions collided inside the Demon Sound Fire God Bell artifact, the resulting shockwave was almost too much for the artifact to withstand. The Purple Clock outside was even knocked back by the 2 explosions combined. The Demon Sound Fire God Bell barrier could indeed withstand 90% of Kang Jin's explosive power, but the remaining power that escaped was still enough to cause considerable damage to the Purple Clock, which sacrificed half of its divine body to withstand the explosion. Starting from here, Purple Clock tried to strengthen the grip of his artifact, and in order to minimize the impact of the enemy's explosion aimed at him, he sent the explosion out of the bell towards the surface below, causing the floor of the central room to collapse. Meanwhile, Purple Clock assumes that even though Luofeng has Shu Wu's wings and silver armor, his body will still likely be torn to shreds. Even in such a dangerous situation, Luofeng still has a way out. The explosion from Purple Clock's artifact, which was directed downward, spreads across almost the entire corridor and opens up a new gap. Lord Pu-ai, who was moving through the hallway, was also nearly caught in the explosion. Fortunately, he managed to escape danger and arrived right in front of the room containing his ancestors' legacy. On the other hand, the explosion that formed a new passageway became an escape route from the treasure room. Purple Clock, whose divine body was partially destroyed and whose body respawned, immediately laughed because now that Kang Jin and the 2 humans there were dead, he could get all the treasure. After dancing happily, Purple Clock descended through a crack in the floor that led directly to the hallway. He intended to pick up the chain treasure chest that had fallen down, but when he looked around, it was nowhere to be found. Not only was the chain chest missing, but the drop that Kang Jin had dropped was also nowhere to be seen. When Purple Clock was confused, that was when Luofeng reappeared and smiled at his enemy. Luofeng was still alive because he had previously used Mosha's body and Shiwu's wings to survive the explosion. And now Luofeng thanked Purple Clock for helping him obtain his treasure in an easier way. Of course, after hearing Luofeng's taunts, Purple Clock immediately became frustrated. Instantly, he attacked Luofeng, but Luofeng immediately fled using his Universe Resonance movement skill. As the two of them played tag in the hallway, Luofeng could sense that his mental powers had detected the presence of another Yanji race figure in front of him, who was entering a treasure room. The Yanji race was trying to ensure that the most important treasures of their people would not fall into the hands of the invaders. Seeing that creature reminded Luofeng of his past. Elder Chu Chi-Ka had made the same sacrifice as the strongest warriors of Earth in his time, sacrificing himself to stop the rampage of the golden-horned behemoth. There were also Hung and Leishan, who had helped Luofeng a lot. And now Luofeng felt very realistic about the situation of Lord Pu-ai, who was taking the inheritance. Instead of continuing to move forward, Luofeng finally chose to turn back so that Pu-ai could take his inheritance safely. Meanwhile, Purple Clock was in the middle of the road when he saw Luofeng turn around. Purple Clock wanted to catch him and put him in the ancient Purple Bell. After aiming at Luofeng, he initially thought that Luofeng had been caught, but in fact, Luofeng was able to escape with his quick movements. According to Luofeng, the sacrificial tower was too narrow for serious combat. So, in order to show his best performance, Luofeng looked for a way out of the building. Purple Clock was still chasing him from behind. Aside from the treasure, he also didn't want anyone else to know that he had the Demon Sound Fire God Bell artifact. If everyone found out, he would definitely become the target of many people. Therefore, he had no choice but to kill Luofeng. However, as soon as he exited the building, instead of encountering Luofeng, Purple Clock was immediately confronted by the golden horn behemoth Skin Gold. Instantly, the monster slammed Purple Clock, sending him flying far away and destroying his physical body. Although it could be revived in its current state, Purple Clock could no longer continue the fight. Its strength had been greatly depleted from the previous battle in the tower. Rather than continuing to fight, Purple Clock finally chose to leave. It promised to reclaim the treasure taken by Luofeng, the treasure that should have been its own. Now that Luofeng had driven away the enemy, everything was safe. As for the revival of the Yanji race, that will depend on them alone. That is all the help Luofeng can offer.
你夺取本该是以后的路，就靠你们自己了。
In the end, Lord Pu-ai successfully brought his ancestors' legacy back to their secret headquarters safely. The inheritance contained a chip with a manual that seemed to be very useful to them. Of course, great respect was also given to the elder Chu Chi-Ka, without whose sacrifice Pu-ai would not have been able to bring the inheritance back safely. And with this inheritance, Lord Pu-ai was confident that their people would rise again from their decline after living in suffering for so long.
但也为我们族群大灾难前已经全部带回来了。有了族群的无数秘法，我们已就崛起。族群传承，我族群一定会强大，一定会再大。
In a cave, Luofeng and Star Fantasy were discussing a solution to revive King Ye Chen, which would require a very high cost. So, Luofeng gave Star Fantasy the rings belonging to Kong Jin and Si Wei Ka. This would be additional funds to revive Ye Chen. Meanwhile, Luofeng was satisfied with the treasure chest that was still locked with chains. Regarding reviving Ye Chen, Star Fantasy explained that if there was a Universe Master, he would revive many human warriors at the Immortal King level at once, including Star Fantasy's older brother. Even though it would take a very long time to see him again, and she would have to accept various difficult missions, Star Fantasy would feel very lucky if she could fight alongside her brother again. Because her body was severely damaged, Star Fantasy immediately left to recover. Before she left, she thanked Luofeng for protecting her while she was unconscious, and the two parted ways.
恐怕留不住里面的贵重宝物。谢谢你，在我昏迷期间保护了我。
Well, I'm confused. In this episode, there might be a story that doesn't make sense. The question is, how did Luofeng know that when he escaped from the Purple Clock, Pu-ai was there, entering the treasure room that contained their ancestors' relics? Even Chu Chi-Ka didn't tell anyone about the other room that contained the Yanji race's treasure. Maybe you viewers know what happened. You can write it in the comments section. Okay, thank you for watching until the end, and don't forget to support this channel with likes, subscribe, and comments. That's all from me. Bye.
宝藏已不见踪影，看来此中所
了解你的狡诈心性。
不言废墟。
最近有不止一人和我确认。
打算何时动手？
这个人，
你是否得到了祭坛宝藏？
你赌，绝对价值无量。我知道不让他有片刻喘息，直接下手。他也清楚我有备而来。杀手，呀，你死定了！